and welcome to the 8th Impact Youth Devotional video. Today we're going to be looking at chapters 21 through 24 in the book of Genesis. And this is where we finally see the promised son born to Abraham. He finally has his wife Sarah gives birth to Isaac at the age of 90 years old. Abraham's 100 years old. But the promise that God made 25 years earlier finally comes to fruition. And the result that you're going to see is that ultimately the child that Abraham tried to conceive on his own doing, Ishmael, has to be sent away. But what's really interesting here for us as we look at the political world structure is when you look at all of the Muslims in the world, all of those people actually trace their lineage back through Ishmael. So a very fascinating thing, Israel is constantly at war between the Jews and the nation of Israel and between Palestine and all of the Muslims there, and that would be the child of promise, Isaac and his lineage, the Jews, and the children or the people who claim to be the ancestors of Ishmael at war for now probably 4,000 years since this moment, just to bring a little bit of biblical history to our current events. What we're also going to see then is right after Abraham has this child of promise, in chapter 22, God asks him to kill his one and only son. Sounds a bit familiar to what God did as he sent his own son to earth, Jesus, to give up his life on the cross. Now perhaps we can understand why God was willing to do that with Jesus and why God was also willing to ask another man, the man that he was beginning his people from, Abraham and Isaac. He was asking them to do the exact same thing that he knew he was going to be doing years later. Finally, in chapter 23, we see the death of Sarah and a very long account about negotiating for the plot of land that Sarah is going to live in or be buried in. What we need to understand is obviously it must have been very important to the Israelites when this finally got written down, where Sarah was buried and where Abraham was buried, and that he had actually paid the fair price for it. One thing that's important to know is these stories in Genesis were likely written by Moses over 500 years after the stories actually took place. Moses and the people leaving Egypt was over 500 years after Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So we have to understand Moses is writing about something that took place a really long time before, and he's probably including material that is important to his people in his day when he's writing it down. Finally, in chapter 24, you're going to read the story of how Isaac is essentially given his wife by God, and we read this incredible story of circumstance of how God has essentially handpicked the wife that Isaac is to have. And we see how there are times, I believe, if we were able to watch the story from the outside, we would see that God is also working through the circumstances of our lives, handpicking different events that we are to be walking through in our own lives and learning from. Those are just a few tips as you read through chapters 21 through 24 today. Thanks.